Ancient Egypt, Pharaohs. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were the supreme leaders of the land. They were like kings or emperors. They ruled both Upper and Lower Egypt, and were both the political and religious leader. The pharaoh was often thought of as one of the gods. The name pharaoh comes from a word meaning great house, describing a palace or kingdom. The pharaoh's wife, or queen of Egypt, was also considered a powerful ruler. She was called the Great Royal Wife. Sometimes women became the rulers and were called pharaoh, but it was generally men. The son of the current pharaoh would inherit the title and would often go through training, so he could be a good leader. Historians divide up the timeline of ancient Egyptian history by the dynasties of the pharaohs. A dynasty was when one family maintained power, handing down the throne to an heir. There are generally considered to be 31 dynasties over the 3,000 years of ancient Egyptian history. There were many great pharaohs throughout the history of ancient Egypt. Here are some of the more famous ones. Akhenaten. Akhenaten was famous for saying there was only one God, the sun god. He ruled with his wife, Nefertiti, and they closed many of the temples to other gods. He was the father of the famous King Tut. Tutankhamun. Often called King Tut today, Tutankhamun is largely famous today because much of his tomb remained intact and we have one of the greatest Egyptian treasures from his rule. He became pharaoh at the age of 9. He tried to bring back the gods that his father had banished. Hatshepsut. A lady pharaoh, Hatshepsut was originally regent for her son, but she took on the power of pharaoh. She also dressed like the pharaoh to reinforce her power, including the crown and ceremonial beard. Many consider her to not only be the greatest woman pharaoh, but one of the greatest pharaohs in the history of Egypt. Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III ruled for 39 years of great prosperity. He brought Egypt to its peak of power. During his rule, the country was at peace, and he was able to enlarge many cities and construct temples. Ramses II. Often called Ramses the Great, he ruled Egypt for 67 years. He is famous today because he built more statues and monuments than any other pharaoh. Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra VII is often considered the last pharaoh of Egypt. She maintained power by making alliances with famous Romans such as Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Fun facts about pharaohs. Pepi II became pharaoh at the age of 6. He would rule Egypt for 94 years. The pharaohs wore a crown that had an image of the cobra goddess. Only the pharaoh was allowed to wear the cobra goddess. It was said that she would protect them by spitting flames at their enemies. Pharaohs built great tombs for themselves so they could live well in the afterlife. The first pharaoh was a king named Menes, who united both Upper and Lower Egypt into a single country. Khufu is the pharaoh who built the largest pyramid. Ancient Egypt biography, Akhenaton. Occupation, Pharaoh of Egypt. Born around 1380 BC. Died 1336 BC. Reign 1353 BC to 1336 BC. Best known for changing the religion of ancient Egypt and building the city of Amarna. Biography. Akhenaton was an Egyptian pharaoh who ruled during the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom period of ancient Egypt. He is famous for changing the traditional religion of Egypt from the worship of many gods to the worship of a single god named Aten. Akhenaton was born in Egypt around 1380 BC. He was the second son to the pharaoh Amenhotep III. When his older brother died, Akhenaton became the crown prince of Egypt. He grew up in the royal palace learning how to be the leader of Egypt. Becoming Pharaoh. Some historians think that Akhenaten served as co-pharaoh alongside his father for several years. Others do not. Either way, Akhenaten took over as pharaoh around the year 1353 BC when his father died. Under his father's rule, Egypt had become one of the most powerful and wealthy nations in the world. The civilization of Egypt was at its peak around the time Akhenaten took control. Changing his name. When Akhenaten became pharaoh, he still had his birth name of Amenhotep. His formal title was Pharaoh Amenhotep IV. However, around the 5th year of his reign as pharaoh, he changed his name to Akhenaten. This new name represented his belief in a new religion that worshipped the sun god, Aten. It meant living spirit of Aten. Changing the religion. Once he became pharaoh, Akhenaten decided to reform the Egyptian religion. For thousands of years, the Egyptians had worshipped a variety of gods such as Amun, Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Thoth. Akhenaten, however, believed in a single god named Aten. Akhenaten built a number of temples to his new god. He also had many of the old temples closed and removed some of the old gods from inscriptions. Many of the Egyptian people and priests were not happy with him for this. Amarna. Around 1346 BC, Akhenaten decided to build a city to honor the god Aten. The city was called Akhenaten by the ancient Egyptians. Today, archaeologists call it Amarna. Amarna became the capital city of Egypt during Akhenaten's reign. It housed the royal palace and the great temple of the Aten. Queen Nefertiti. Akhenaten's main wife was Queen Nefertiti. Nefertiti was a very powerful queen. She ruled alongside Akhenaten as the second most powerful person in Egypt. Today, Nefertiti is famous for a sculpture of her that shows how beautiful she was. She is often referred to in history as the most beautiful woman in the world. Changing art. Along with the change in religion, Akhenaten brought a dramatic change to Egyptian art. Prior to Akhenaten, people were presented with ideal faces and perfect bodies. During Akhenaten's reign, artists depicted people more how they really looked. This was a dramatic change. Some of the most beautiful and unique artwork from ancient Egypt comes from this time period. Death and legacy. Akhenaten died around 1336 BC. Archaeologists are unsure who took over as pharaoh, but it appears that there were two pharaohs who ruled for a short time before Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun, became pharaoh. It wasn't long after Akhenaten's reign that Egypt returned to its traditional religion. The capital city moved back to Thebes, and eventually the city of Amarna was abandoned. Later, pharaohs had Akhenaten's name removed from the list of pharaohs because he went against the traditional gods. He was sometimes referred to as the enemy in Egyptian records. Interesting facts about Akhenaten. His religious leanings were likely influenced by his mother, Queen Tai. The city of Amarna was abandoned not long after Akhenaten's death. It is likely that Akhenaten suffered from a disorder called Marfan syndrome. He was probably buried at the royal tomb in Amarna, but his body was not found there. It may have been destroyed or possibly moved to the Valley of the Kings.